Takumi. Ah!
And so he goes to heaven. And so am I revenged.
Asura!
That would be thought on. A villain kills my father, and for that I, his sole son, do this same villain send to heaven.
You killed my father. Big mistake.
Of all the Fire Emblem lords, the protagonists that these games and their stories flow through, none are disliked as much as Corrin, the indecisive identity crisis hero of Fire Emblem Fates. There are a lot of reasons for this hatred, with opinions varying from disliking Fates' writing, to Corrin being bland, and to them being a horrible decision-maker. In the years since Fates' release, Corrin's reputation as a piñata for fans has been solidified and largely unquestioned. Some have defended Corrin. I don't want to erase Vivian Aladrin's full-throated defense of Corrin in our series fan ranking video, but I wanted to see for myself. I recently replayed Fates Conquest on normal Phoenix mode to get the full story experience. This video is, for the most part, going to be a philosophical discussion about how we understand fictional characters, the challenges of writing a playable character, and how customizable avatars compound these problems. For many, Corrin's problem is that they frequently make bad decisions. Obviously incorrect decisions that should, in theory, jeopardize Corrin's life, the lives of their compatriots, and their role as a leader. Why does Corrin not just kill Hans and Iago when given the chance? Why does Corrin keep following Garen's deluded orders? Why does Corrin not betray the rotten kingdom of Nor for Hoshido? My immediate reaction to this kind of criticism is suspicion. Many of the most banal, boring YouTube media critics from CinemaSins to Mahler and countless loquacious snark merchants in between nurse this approach. This philosophy of criticizing the logical consistency of stories and the characters that populate them has many problems. For one, it's undynamic and predictable. More egregiously, it treats stories and characters as little logic boxes, puzzle pieces that must fit together for a story to be engaging or well written. And, most annoyingly, it essentially amounts to, well, if that were me personally. It's easy to rattle off rhetorical questions and leave them unanswered as a gotcha. A standard criticism of Corrin may as well read, why doesn't Corrin kill Hans at the end of chapter 14 when he's killing all the innocent civilians? Corrin knows it's wrong, and says so, yet doesn't act. Me personally, I wouldn't let Hans do that. That question of why Corrin doesn't intervene is actually a great question if taken seriously. The problem is that the question often isn't taken seriously and instead sidestepped to question the logic of the decision. Characters in stories, like real humans, do not inherently act logically. Many of us behave completely illogically. The philosopher and essayist Michel de Montaigne observed that we are, I know not how, double in ourselves, so that what we believe we disbelieve, and cannot rid ourselves of what we condemn. When approaching ourselves and stories with that in mind, we become more aware of how universal it is to act against one's own beliefs. Hamlet is considered the greatest text in the English language, in large part because of how succinctly and perfectly it realizes the internal struggle of humanity. Hamlet wants to get revenge against Claudius for killing his father, but fails to do so. Not because his plans go awry, but because his ego can't bridge the gap between his id and superego. This internal conflict of belief, desire, and the inability to mediate those is central to basically all narrative art, from Greek tragedy to pop entertainment to surrealism and all other forms. By criticizing the tension between belief and action, we indulge the superego, the part of the mind that governs moral consciousness, and effectively deny the complexities of personhood. It's easy to sit back and say, Corrin should just kill Hans, and there's probably not many people who would consider it morally wrong to kill a man who's actively killing a large number of civilians. So yes, Corrin should kill Hans, but it's not as simple as, if that were me personally. In our fantasies, it's easy to be a righteous hero, the person that sacrifices themselves for a noble cause, or rushes down a shooter, or saves someone from violence. In reality, despite what we say, some of us will cower, others will run, some may fight, along with a myriad of other possibilities. It's made further worse, as Montaigne said, by our inability to rid ourselves of what we condemn. For Corrin, in that situation, to kill Hans, they must defy their father, who they desperately hope to please, deny their kingdom during wartime, and fail to live up to the knightly standards of the older Xander and Leo. Early in Fates, we see how much Corrin values Xander's judgment, and being locked away, it's explicit how much Corrin wants to be seen as strong and loyal, and be validated by Garen and Xander. It's hard to shake off a lifetime of desire, even in a moment as extreme as Hans slaughtering civilians. What makes the super-ego reaction hard to shake off is that Corrin is the main character in a video game. More than any other medium, video games provide a direct and immediate link between the character on screen and the superego in your brain. It's why games have become such a successful form of escapism. When you play Resident Evil, you run in and start blasting the monsters. In real life, most of us would either snivel in the corner or get eaten instantly like every other sad sap in the game. The same applies to Fire Emblem, where we get to control heroic princes and princesses as they save their lands from evil. Games run into resistance from players when our superegos are denied, whether it's the white phosphorus scene in Spec Ops The Line or Erica handing over the MacGuffin in Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones. In our heads, that's not an atrocity we would commit, nor a mistake we would make. By controlling the character, we take them as an extension of ourselves. See, in other mediums, it's easier to accept mistakes or cruelty committed by protagonists because the screen or the page offers a buffer between the viewer and the character. The controller, however, makes us them. Okay, so if it's unhelpful to say, well, if that were me personally, what can we criticize? The common mistake made by so many YouTube critics is to atomize a work down to its individual scenes and to look at them one by one. Like how there never truly is a single moment in time, there is no one scene in a work. Every scene happens in the context of the scenes that come before and those that are yet to come. Chapter 14 does not happen by itself, so these are the questions we can ask. Does letting Hans kill civilians affect Corrin? Does Corrin face internal or external conflict as a result that changes them? Does Corrin face no consequences, thus reinforcing a bad habit of inaction that will come back later to haunt Corrin? The reason this scene doesn't work is because there really aren't consequences. Corrin is bailed out, but this never reverberates throughout the text in a dramatic or meaningful way. Early on, when Corrin is ordered to kill prisoners, they refuse. Leo bails out Corrin with his magic. This moment rewards Corrin's combination of idealism and poor decision-making. To see this idea repeated later is simple dramatic structure. The problem is that there are no dramatic consequences. Corrin, being the player avatar, is imbued with the power of dramaticus interruptus. It's as if intelligent systems views any consequences towards Corrin as consequences towards the player. While the actions of Corrin go against the superego of most players, the game coddles the player's id, as if any challenges to the perfection of the player avatar will be impulsively rejected by the player. This is definitely something that happens with games, but since Corrin has serious flaws, it creates a disconnect where there is a story happening and a character being developed that must ultimately be rewarded to protect the player-protagonist relationship. Now, the prose in Fates is horrendous, absolutely terrible, but even with that massive handicap, Corrin is doomed. Not because they're naive or indecisive, but because they're a character whose flaws do not affect or are affected by the story. Corrin is a protagonist disconnected from the story. That's not an impossible concept to make work, but the childishness with which it's handled by lapping endless praise on Corrin and the horrible lethargy of the prose prevent it from coming close to working. The implications of this are quite serious for the dramatic viability of Fire Emblem going forward. Corrin is the second Avatar protagonist in the series after Chris in New Mystery of the Emblem. Neither character works at all, but instead of backing off the idea, Intelligent Systems kept the Avatar with Byleth and Three Houses, but made them nearly silent, with their only lines being dialogue options, and their only hint of a personality being this one early example of the Kuleshov effect. With Fire Emblem Engage featuring the Avatar Alir, it's critical that Intelligent Systems makes them dramatically dynamic, otherwise we officially have a decade-plus trend of poor protagonists. But, considering how much people whined about Erika and Celica making awful mistakes that deepened their characters, I'd say, fat chance. Strap in, everyone. The discourse is going to be toxic. And that statement won't even date this video. See you all next time.